Hey everybody, Mr. Morel here, and today in this video we are going to be solving some basic two-step equations. So the idea here is in the last homework assignment you were solving one-step equations, but our goal by the end of this unit is to be solving some pretty scary and complicated equations. And so obviously we're going to take it one step at a time, and I'm going to use these easier equations to teach you some techniques and some methods that are going to make solving the harder equations a lot easier. So you might feel frustrated that I'm like kind of making you do some stuff, but keep in mind, I've been teaching this a lot of years, and there are going to be things that will really help out as we get to the end of this unit when the equations get pretty tough. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump in. Basically, on this homework assignment, you're going to have three different types of equations. So I'm going to solve those three different types of equations. Like we're going to do two examples. Well, that's the number two. We're going to do two examples of each type of equation, just so you can see. So here we go. The first type of example is going to look kind of like this. So in this example, we have 2x plus 3 equals 5. Now, something that's going to be really important is it's not like the best way to solve an equation is going to be to learn how to read an equation. And that can be tricky. In English, we're so used to reading from left to right. In math, we don't do that. We really follow PEMDAS. We follow order of operations, and we will always start with the variable. So before I solve this equation, let's practice reading what this equation is saying. So again, we don't go left to right necessarily. We're always going to start with the variable. So I'm going to start here with the letter x. And like, it's really important to me, if you're watching this video, that means you might be struggling or maybe you missed the lesson. But it's important to me that you practice reading this along with me. So you can read it in your brain. If you want to say it out loud, maybe that will help it stick in your brain a little bit better. But the idea is this. As I start with the letter x, I'm just going to say what I see in the equation. So for example, x is being multiplied by 2. Anytime we see a number and a letter stuck together just like this, there's like an invisible, here I'll make it red, an invisible multiplication symbol. So x times 2 plus 3 equals 5. That's how I would read that. Now, my best method to help you solve equations correctly is with something called a chore chart. That's what this white box is over here. Now, the reason I call it a chore chart is because I kind of like to tease teenagers and their rebellion. And so the idea, the story behind the chore chart is you can imagine this equation like a list of chores that your parents give you before they go out of town. So if you're the letter X, basically your parents are asking you, hey, while we're gone, will you multiply by 2 and add 3? And the reason, like I said, why I call it a chore chart is because to solve an equation, we're going to have to do the opposite operations backwards. So with our silly chore chart story, the idea is that if your parents give you a list of chores to do, you're not going to do the chores. You're going to do the opposite. In fact, you're going to even do them in the opposite order just to make your parents as angry as possible. Okay, so let's practice reading this one more time, but this time you're going to watch me fill out this chore chart. So the question tells us to solve for x. I'm always going to start by writing the letter x at the top to remind myself that's what we're solving for. As we get later on in the unit, that's not always going to be x. It's going to be different, and it's going to be tricky. So we're going to label with an x. And remember, how we read this was x times 2. Notice how I'm just writing down the things I see, the things I'm reading. X times 2 plus 3. And then we can stop once we get to the equal sign. No more stuff to write. So here's the list of chores that your parents are asking you. They're asking you to multiply by 2 and add by 3. But you're a rebellious teenager, so you're going to actually do the opposite backwards. You're going to start at the bottom of the list, and you're not going to add 3. You're going to subtract 3. And you're not going to multiply by 2. You're going to divide by 2. Okay? So that's how we're going to solve this equation. We're going to undo all of this stuff. So starting at the bottom, if you have my class, sometimes we talk about bottoms up. I kind of imagine drinking some root beer, bottoms up. So instead of adding 3, what we're going to do is we're going to subtract 3 from both sides of the equation. So you can see I drew this little line here to remind myself, whatever you do to one side of this equation, we're going to do to the other. So I'm going to start by subtracting 3 from both sides. Notice how I'm writing all of my steps. We're going to expect on your homework, we're going to see a chore chart because I need to know that you can read an equation. And then I need to see the steps so that I know that you know how to solve an equation. So start by subtracting 3. You'll notice how I lined up like terms. 3 minus 3 equals 0. It's going to go away. 5 minus 3 is 2. We still have our equal sign right here. And I still have a 2x over on this side. So let me go ahead and write that down. Now, I'm just going to cross that item off the list because we just took care of it. Now we're going to move up the list. The opposite of multiplying by 2 is dividing by 2. Now, I know that when you were younger, you kind of learned to divide with this symbol here. But 9th grade, almost always when we divide, we're going to draw it kind of like a fraction. We're going to divide both sides by 2, just like this. So I can mark that off my list. And 2x divided by 2 is just 1x, or I'm just going to write x. Same thing as 1x. Equals 2 divided by 2 is 1. And what we just did is we just solved the equation. The answer here is x equals 1. Now let me just show you really quickly how you can check your work, because knowing what we're doing is super important. Our goal is we're trying to find a number that we could replace x with, something we can substitute that will make both sides of this equation true. And I'm saying the number 1 will make that happen. So we can actually double check that. I'm going to substitute the number 1 in for x. We did substituting last unit. So I'm substituting x with a 1 because that's what I think the answer is. And you can either use your calculator, or some of you already know this in your brain. 2 times 1 plus 3. Well, 2 times 1 plus 3 is going to be 5. 5 does equal 5, so I know we found the correct x number that we could substitute in. That was our answer. All right, so that question took a little while because I was trying to lay a bunch of groundwork. Let's hop into the next question and see if we can keep using these ideas. All right, so solve for x. I'm going to go ahead and label my chore chart with the letter x. That's where I start, right here, and let's read this thing out loud. So this equation says x over 2, or I'm going to say x divided by 2. So let's go ahead and write that. That's the closest thing to the letter x. X divided by 2 minus 3 equals 5. Okay, so x divided by 2 minus 3 equals 5. We're just practicing reading it. Make sure you're filling out your chore chart on your questions on your homework, because I need to see that you can read an equation. That's just as important as the answer. And we're going to go ahead, bottoms up. We're going to solve this from the bottom all the way up, doing opposite operations. We're going to rebel. So the opposite of subtracting 3 is going to be to add 3 on both sides of the equation. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a plus 3 right here. Negative 3 plus 3 cancels out. The whole reason we're adding 3 is to get rid of this, to move this term. 5 plus 3 is 8, and x over 2 equals 8. You can hopefully start to see that as we knock off chores, it's going to make this equation shorter. We're going to be getting rid of these numbers. Okay, we took care of this one. Let me change colors here. So the opposite of dividing by 2 is going to be multiplying by 2. So I'm going to multiply this side of the equation by 2, and I'm going to multiply this side of the equation by 2. Now, just in case you're curious, I'm going to kind of explain what this thing is doing over here. 2 times x over 2 is the same as 2x over 2, which is just 1x. Essentially, these 2's kind of cancel each other out. They divide to equal 1, essentially. And so we're left with an x equals 16. Okay, so I'm claiming that that's my answer, that x equals 16 is the magical thing that's going to make this equation true. Let me go ahead and erase all this work just to double check my answer. So if I substitute the number 16 in for x, then I'm going to have 16 divided by 2. We got to start using our knowledge from the first unit. It's almost like we learned that for a reason. So 16 divided by 2 is 8, and 8 minus 3 does equal 5. So I ended up getting 5 equals 5. That is a true statement. So I know that x equals 16 was the right answer. All right, let's try another one. So here, this one looks kind of similar to this one, but you could see this division line is a little bit longer. Remember something we talked about in the first unit is there's kind of these invisible parentheses at the top, essentially reminding you that as we read this, we need to read the whole top of the fraction first. Okay, so let's go ahead and read. I've got to get my pen ready. We're solving for x, so at the top of my chart chart, I'm labeling it with the letter x. And as we read it, it says x plus 2, because we got to make sure we add 2 before we do any dividing on this example. Got to do the whole top. Okay, so x plus 2 divided by 3. So let's go ahead and put divided by 3 equals 5. All right, bottoms up. Whoop. And the opposite of dividing by 3 is multiplying by 3. Now, again, I could kind of get into a lot of detail about why this works. If you're interested, sign up for Study Hall. Let us get you in and talk more about it in detail. But I'm just trying to make this video shorter than super long. But essentially, when I multiply this whole side of the equation by 3, it's going to cancel out these 3's here, leaving us with x plus 2 equals 5 times 3 is 15. Okay, so we just took care of that. Next chore, plus 2. So instead of adding 2, we're going to go ahead and subtract 2. Oh, I should have drawn my big line here. All right, so x plus 2 minus 2, we're going to be left with x equals, let's see, 15 minus 2 is going to be 13. And I think that should be our answer because we're left with just x equals 13. So let me go ahead and put this over here, and we're going to just double check and make sure that's right. It's a really good habit to check your answers, not just with the check answer button, but by actually plugging numbers in, because that helps you remember what we're even trying to do. We're trying to find this missing x number. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and substitute the number 13 in for x. So 13 plus 2 over 3 equals 5. Okay, 13 plus 2 is 15 over 3. And we still have the equals 5. And 15 divided by 3 is 5. 5 equals 5. We found the magical x number that makes this whole equation the same on both sides. So those are basically the 3 types of equations that you're going to see. I'm going to do 3 more examples. They're basically the same idea, just a little bit like there are tricks in there. These are like level 3 questions. So for example, over here, we have this question, and this one can be really tricky because as I'm trying to read my chore chart, for example, here's, I'm going to solve this incorrectly just to show you why this is incorrect, because otherwise maybe you'll just think, well, that should be the right answer. So if I was reading this the way I think most students would read it, I would read this as x times 3 minus 7. Okay, so let's just roll with it just for a second. And I'm going to kind of show you where things go wrong. So if I do my opposite operations, the opposite of subtracting 7 is adding 7. Well, here's my very first signal that this isn't right. 7 plus 7 doesn't cancel out. That actually ends up equaling 14. So there's something kind of off right here. And let's just assume you thought that was going to happen and you added 7 over here and got 11. Okay, so again, kind of going the wrong way. Maybe you think this is 11 equals negative 3x. Okay, well, here's your next blunder that's going to happen. Divide by 3. Well, negative 3, oops, sorry, there's a goof right there. Negative 3 divided by 3 isn't 1x. It's going to be negative 1x. And let's just say that you keep going anyway, and you divide by 3 and you get x equals 11 thirds. Well, when you plug that in, you're not going to end up with a 4. Okay, so again, I think it's important to kind of look at possible mistakes, and that's why we're doing that. But let's go ahead and do this correctly. Oops, I want to delete these things. Let's do that correctly, and let me show you the trick. The trick here is that x isn't being multiplied by a positive 3. It's being multiplied by a negative 3. First unit, we practiced changing these minus signs. Anytime I see a coefficient that's a minus, like right before it, those are the ones that I'll usually change in an equation. I don't always change them. It's just in examples like this. So now I could read this, x times -3, and this is plus 7. And I know that can feel really complicated and confusing, and I 100% get it. Hopefully this video is kind of helping you remember some of the stuff we talked about in class. Okay, we're going to do opposite operations backwards. The opposite of adding 7 is subtracting 7 from both sides of the equation. Okay, 7 minus 7 is 0. Those cancel out. 4 minus 7 is -3 equals -3x. We're done with that chore. Next up, times -3. Remember, it's just the opposite operation. So I'm going to divide both sides by -3, not a positive, stick with the negative. -3 divided by -3 is, +1 equals -3x divided by -3 is 1x. So I'm claiming that the answer is x equals 1. Give me a quick second just to prove that that's true. I'm going to go ahead and delete this stuff because this is a good habit to get into. And I'm going to substitute the x with the number 1 just to check my work. So I've got 4 equals 7 minus 3 times 1. Okay, you can use your calculator if you want to, but essentially this is going to be 7 minus, let's see, 3 times 1 is 3, and 7 minus 3 is the number 4. We got the same thing on both sides, so I know that was the right answer. Cool, we're plugging right along. Next one. Oh, yeah, so here's the trick on this one. Sometimes it's tough to know what to do with a minus sign in front of a fraction. But something we talked about in class is that negative, let's use 1/2 really fast. -1/2, wow, that's pretty, is the exact same as the number -1/2, which is the exact same as 1/2. In other words, when you have a negative right in front of a fraction, you can either put it on top or on the bottom, but not in both places. This is a negative fraction, so it only is going to have one minus sign somewhere, one negative sign. So my trick to this kind of a question is, let's move that negative sign from being right here, and let's tack it down with the 8. And here's why I did that. When I go to read this equation, I'm going to start with x, and I have x divided by -8. So, oh look, I'm going to use that magical sign, divided by -8 plus 1. So I'm just practicing reading that. X divided by -8 plus 1, bottoms up. And we're going to go ahead and do the opposite operations backwards. Plus 1, the opposite of that is -1. So x over -8 equals, wow, I'm not doing this very pretty. 5 minus 1 is 4. Okay, so we're done with that one. The opposite operation of divide is to multiply. So now I'm going to multiply both sides by -8, multiply by -8, and cancel those out. And we're left with x equals, this should be -32. All right, we already talked about how to check our answers. So let me move this over here and let's double check. And I'm going to go ahead and replace, replace -32 with, replace the x with -32, just to check my work. So I've got that was not pretty. -32, I got a negative in front of this fraction, divided by 8, plus 1 equals 5. Okay, -32 divided by 8, or if it's helpful for you, let's just move this negative down with the 8. Okay, -32 divided by -8 is going to be +4 plus 1 equals 5, and you can probably already see it. 5 does equal 5, so I know that I found the right answer. All right, last one. Really not a lot of tricks to this one, just some more practice reading equations. So we got an x. Because all this stuff is on top of the fraction, we're going to say x minus 4 times, divided by, we're going to be multiplying soon. This line means to divide, divided by negative 8. Bottoms up. My first step is to multiply by negative 8 on both sides. I'm going to write it on this side over here like this, because that's going to end up canceling out. Multiply by negative 8 over here. So I got negative 56 equals x minus 4. Whoop. Next up, the opposite of subtracting 4 is to add 4 to both sides of that equation. I probably should have drawn my line here. And careful, use your calculator. Negative 56 plus 4 is negative 52 equals x. So here we go. I'm going to write that answer down. X equals negative 52. Just to check my work, because even I make mistakes. It happens a lot, especially my students can testify to that. Get rid of that. Okay, let's check our work. I'm going to substitute negative 52 in for x. So negative 52 minus 4 divided by negative 8 equals 7. All right, negative 52 minus 4, that's negative 56 divided by negative 8 equals 7. And use your calculator if you need, but negative 56 divided by negative 8 is 7. So I got 7 equals 7 on both sides of the equation. So I know that that answer was correct. All right, on this homework assignment, you're going to have a level 4 question. I'm not going to tell you how to do the level 4 question, but I'm going to give you a good hint. Your question is going to say something like, you currently have $20 and you're going to earn $10 per week. And I think I gave you a variable. Let's say the week is W. So you're going to end up needing to write an equation. So you're going to have an equal sign in there. But what I wanted to say is, how would you read this part here? You currently have $20. I would usually say, okay, cool, we got 20. The word and usually means plus. You're earning $10, and it's going to say per week. So every week we're going to get 10 more dollars. That's usually multiplying. So times W. Now I'm going to let you figure out what should go on this side of the equal sign. But in this example, you had $20 and you're earning $10 per week. That's what that side of the equation should look like. Something like that, okay? Double check your variables and stuff. Anyway, hopefully this video was helpful for you. I know that we kind of spend a lot of time reading equations, but that's going to be very, 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 very important later on. I promise. You got to trust me. Okay, thank you guys for watching. I hope you have a great night. Good luck with your homework. Toodaloo. Bye.